สวัสดีครับ Good noon everyone. Today is Saturday the 24th of August 2019. Today I will talk a bit about Sudan and the Sudanese people. I'm quite sure that many of you have been following the events and development in Sudan, especially the 6-7 months of protests between the opposition and the military junta. But finally, on the 4th of August, the military junta and the opposition, civilian opposition, were able to come to an agreement and initialed a document called Constitutional Declaration. And 10 days, about 2 weeks later, on the 17th of August, the two sides held a formal signing ceremony on this constitutional declaration, which stipulates more or less to set up an interim authority called the Supreme Council, comprising 6 generals and 5 civilian opposition leaders to oversee the transitional period of Sudan for the next 3 years to prepare Sudan back to a democratic country. So election should be held in 3 years period. Under this Supreme Council, there will be a cabinet, a prime minister and about 10 ministers appointed by this Supreme Council to do the basic preparation of the forthcoming elections, writing the new constitution and so on. The whole point is that Sudan is in transitional period and will be back to a democratic regime. Now, if one were to look back at history, if one were to list 10 countries that have been struggling with so many difficulties, I think Sudan would be one of the top 10 countries in the world. It was an Egyptian and British colony. They had to struggle for independence. After independence, there were so many struggles, civil wars, and 30 years of authoritarian rule by only one man until almost a year ago. Then the people came out and protested against this authoritarian regime, a president of 30 years. Then the military also came in and was instrumental in pushing out this authoritarian president. But the military wanted to hold on to power, but the people have refused. So for the past 8 months, there were so many protests, and the country was on the brink of another civil war, social strife, instability, and so on. But Sudan is a member of the African Union, a continental-wide organization. The African Union did intervene, and a neighboring country, friendly and respected by all the sides inside Sudan, namely Ethiopia, also came in as mediators together with the African Union. And after weeks of negotiation, the military junta and the civilian opposition were able to come to an agreement, which I did mention by the name of the Constitutional Declaration. So the politics of compromise has taken over Sudan. The military has accepted the fact that they cannot replace an authoritarian rule with another authoritarian rule. The Sudanese people are against it. And in that sense, the transitional government has just taken over the country to prepare Sudan back to democracy. Now, on the opposition side, what is interesting, and it could be lessons for Thailand and many of the developing countries that are trying to become democratic, is the fact that the opposition this time are not social movements, not social activists, not NGOs and so on, but the opposition was being led by professionals, namely doctors, nurses, lawyers, and a lot of very active women have come out to oppose the military taking over the power of the country. This phenomenon is quite different from what has been happening in Thailand for so many decades. That the people that have come out onto the street are mostly young people, academicians, activists, NGOs, and so on. But I don't think Thailand have seen any of the professionals, engineers, doctors, nurses, accountants, and so on, coming out onto the street to oppose authoritarian regime. So this is something as a food for thought for Thailand. Is it, and then we can ask ourselves, is it the time now for all the professionals as part of the joint ownership of the sovereignty of the country to take some interest on the political well-being of Thailand and to come out, work closely with social movements, with NGOs, with activists, with advocates to move Thailand forward away from authoritarian or quasi-democracy to a full-fledged democratic regime. And the Sudanese professionals, nurses and doctors and lawyers and so on, have given a lesson for Thailand or other countries that are still striving for democracy. A food for thought, a good lesson that you have to empower yourself, you have to have the sense of belonging, you have to have the sense of ownership to do something for the country. Professionals, associations, professionals in various walks of life cannot wait for the political parties to do the reform, to work for democracy. They cannot go on hoping that a prime minister would do something about the country or a military general would do something about the country. I think Thailand has been failing because the professionals, the academicians, the intellectuals, the media and so on, most of the time have been placing the responsibility on social change, economic change, political change towards democracy on someone else, but not on themselves. But the Sudanese professionals have shown to the world, to us in Thailand, that once they have decided and they are determined to oppose authoritarian regime, to work for the democracy, there can be a success. So what has been happening in Sudan for the past 1 year, more or less, till to this very day, would be a good lesson for Thailand to learn. At the same time, the compromise between the military junta and the civilian professionals, opposition and so on, do not accept any extremism, either religious or tribalism. They have no place in this transitional period, and they have no place in a new democratic regime of Sudan in 3 years' time. Any extremism of any sort have to be stopped, and everyone religious group, tribal groups, ethnic minorities, and so on, would have to participate in the democratic setting with the spirit of compromise. There is no such thing as winner take all. You have to give and take in order that the society can move forward in a compromising manner with tolerance and mutual respect towards one another. So hopefully what happened in Sudan could be a good example for countries like Thailand, for the Thai people and so on, that the military cannot have the absolute power. Any civilian also cannot be authoritarian, but all must work together for the common good in a democratic context. So a food for thought for all of us here living in Thailand. Thank you very much. สวัสดีครับ